If you are worried you have Lyme disease, or just like the outdoors, and want the peace of mind of knowing whether you have Lyme disease or not, there is a new Lyme screening test based on decades of research by Dr. Richard Marconi, a professor at VCU Medical Center. For more information, visit glymedx.com, that's glymedx.com, or email at info@glymedx.com.
Infectious diseases, research, medicine, health. Welcome to Outbreak News Interviews. And now, broadcasting from the Outbreak News Skylar Studios in beautiful West Central Florida, here is your host, microbiologist and editor of OutbreakNewsToday.com, Robert Harriman.
Hey everybody, this is Robert, and this is the first podcast since before Hurricane Irma, and we survived it, and a little bit of cleanup, but it wasn't too bad. We were quite blessed, but we're back to work now, and I want to welcome you to today's show. And one of the bigger stories in recent weeks has been the situation of human infections with a strain of Brucella linked to the consumption of raw or unpasteurized milk. Well, joining me now to discuss this specific situation, to talk about pasteurization and the risk associated with consuming raw milk and milk products, is Amesh Adalja, MD. Dr. Adalja is a senior associate with the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Dr. Adalja, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, on my website, I cover many stories each year concerning outbreaks of infectious agents linked to the consumption of unpasteurized milk. But this particular case that originated in North Texas is quite interesting. Raw milk products from one Texas dairy tested positive for a rare but potentially serious bacteria known as Brucella RB51. Dr. Adalja, what can you tell us about this pathogen?
Well, Brucella is an infectious disease that's been around for quite a long time, and it's something that you learn about in medical school, but you don't see much of if you live in a developed country, because it's really a zoonotic disorder that comes to humans from sheep, goat, cattle. There's in the whole world, there's about 500,000 cases a year, and they're pretty rare in the United States because we pasteurize products and the bacteria killed, but it is something that is potentially dangerous. It's considered a Category B bioagent for bioterrorism purposes, and it is something that has a very wide range of symptoms. Some people don't have any symptoms. Some people can die from it, and it can infect almost any body system. Sometimes people call it a great imitator, like syphilis, because it can really infect any part of your body.
But now this particular strain, though, it's linked to a vaccine given to the cattle.
Well, it's the strain, the RB1 strain. What's specific about it is that it's resistant to one of the drugs that we often give to patients that have Brucella. So it's resistant to rifampin, and rifampin is kind of the backbone of when we're doing like an oral antibiotic treatment plan for someone with Brucella. It involves rifampin, and I think this has made it a little bit more difficult, and they'll have to do sensitivity testing, and they've come up with an alternative regimen, and it's something that we'll have to see how widespread this outbreak is, and how well people respond to antibiotic treatment, because a lot of people who get Brucella do have relapses, and one of the antibiotics that's being recommended is something that is associated with higher rates of relapse.
Now, in a recent post on your blog, Tracking Zebra, you write about the process of pasteurization, clearly one of the cornerstones of food safety. Can you talk about this? Can you explain what it is, and what does it do to milk and milk products?
Well, pasteurization is basically heating any kind of food substance above a certain temperature in order to kill the potentially harmful microorganisms that might be present. And it was something that was developed by Louis Pasteur really to understand how diseases of alcohol fermentation were occurring, and he was trying to really work with the winemakers in the post-industrial revolution era, trying to really increase their yields so that they weren't having so much wine that was spoiled by interfering microorganisms. And from the wine industry and the alcohol industry, it basically spread and made so much food and milk and dairy products safe to consume that it and at the same time really got rid of a lot of diseases like bovine tuberculosis, typhoid. Many different diseases fell because of the use of pasteurization.
And this process is used for more than just milk too, apple juices and other products like that too.
Right. It's like we said, it's the cornerstone of food safety.
Right. Now, something you kind of note in your blog is, the consumption of raw milk has really made a comeback of sorts. And in your opinion, what explains this desire to drink or eat unpasteurized dairy products? Are they healthier? What is it?
I think it's really this kind of irrational type of back to nature type of movement that people are adhering to, that they think that somehow pasteurization makes the milk not as good as if it weren't. And I think that's really irrational. And I think it's almost a return to the primitive, because it was such a great leap forward when Louis Pasteur discovered what was going on causing these disease pathogens to be in certain substances. And to get rid of that was like an unmitigated gift to humanity, basically, allowing people to flourish and not be afraid of the milk and the cheese and the apple juice that they drink. And what the people that don't do this knowingly are doing is basically spitting in the face of what Pasteur did, and really kind of worshiping this back to nature worship that involves really forgetting the fact that nature is a very hostile place if it's not for human minds fixing all of those problems with pasteurization, with vaccination, with all of those types of medical advances. Basically tamed nature, and untamed nature causes things like Brucella.
Well, let me ask you, Brucella is one microbial risk from drinking raw milk. What are some other common pathogens?
Well, Campylobacter is a very famous one that you can get from unpasteurized milk, and that can be linked to Guillain-Barré syndrome. Basically, anything can show up there. We heard about Listeria recently in another outbreak that's occurred. So it's something that you have to remember, that milk is not going to naturally be sterile, and animals have lots of bacteria that live on or in them, and you can get a whole host of infections: Listeria, Brucella, Campylobacter, Salmonella. Anything can be present in something that is contaminated, and pasteurization is one tool, one solution that diminishes that risk.
Okay, let's go ahead and get a word from our sponsor. For many years, we have been waiting for a Lyme disease test that actually works. After decades of research by Dr. Richard Marconi, a professor at the Medical Center at Virginia Commonwealth University, a breakthrough test has been developed. The GLD test, recently launched by Global Lyme Diagnostics, is based on Dr. Marconi's science. For more information, visit glymedx.com. That's glymedx.com, or email at info@glymedx.com. Dr. Adalja, you brought up the issue with the Listeria, and there was, like you said, there was a recent story about consumption of queso fresco, which is a form of soft cheese, and a couple of Listeria cases were identified. And like Brucella, Listeria can be very, very serious. And I just wanted you to elaborate on, what is it about Listeria that's so significant?
Listeria is a kind of an opportunistic bacteria. So it really can cause dangerous infections in pregnant women, those who are immunocompromised, the elderly. And what about it? What it can do is, it's not just a GI illness. It can spread systemically throughout the body. It can cause meningitis and infect the brain areas. And I think that's really what kind of lends it towards its fatal cases. And I think that's what makes it different than a lot of other foodborne pathogens, is that it has a high rate of fatality. And that's why we tell pregnant women to sort of watch what they're eating in terms of soft cheeses and deli meats, that type of thing. And unpasteurized cheese is one other way that people can get listeria. We've also seen it with the juice in hot dogs and hot dog containers that can also harbor listeria. It's just a very dangerous pathogen and can be very, very severe when people contract it.
Now, as an infectious disease physician, what would be your professional advice to the public on consuming raw milk products?
I would say that pasteurization was developed for a reason, and I think you do that at your own risk, and you need to expect that you may end up exposing yourself to a potentially dangerous microorganism when you consume something that is unpasteurized. It is not safe to do so. When there are other alternatives available, it makes no sense to me to consume unpasteurized products. It's one thing if you're starving and that's the only, and there's no access to pasteurization, but in the developed world, we do have pasteurization everywhere. So you have to go out of your way to find something that's unpasteurized.
Yeah. And let me close with this question. It's kind of a philosophical question, but one of the things I found pretty intriguing about your post, which I actually agree with, but a lot of people in my circles would not. And you write, I can't fathom why people would knowingly expose themselves to unpasteurized products when other safer alternatives are readily available. I do, however, believe it's an adult's right to knowingly eat dangerous substances and face the consequences. I'm really interested in getting your thoughts on that, because, yes, it's an adult's right to consume what they want. How does that differ, in your view, concerning, like, say, vaccinations, though?
Well, I think with vaccinations, it's a little bit more muddled because we've got schools with requirements for entry, and I would say there we're really focusing on children who are that's a little bit different because you're talking about a child's right to be brought up, free from dangers, and a child that's not vaccinated against measles is arguably being kind of put at risk. Whereas an adult, it's not the same thing. I think that an adult who refuses a vaccine has that right, but then during an outbreak situation, they can be quarantined and segregated from the rest of the population, which is what happened during early smallpox outbreaks in the early era of vaccination. So I think that there's a little bit of a difference there because we're talking about adults versus children. But I do think when you're talking about a communicable disease, if somebody is refusing a vaccine and putting others at risk because of that, then they can be socially isolated from the rest of society until that outbreak period passes. With ingesting unpasteurized products, I think that they have to face that risk, and when they are diagnosed with those infections, if they are communicable from person to person, they have to be addressed in that way because they for example, if they're a food worker or if they work in an area where they might expose other people and this infection that they contracted from unpasteurized milk is communicable, then they should be appropriately isolated. But I do think that people can, just like people can bungee jump, they can drink unpasteurized milk if they are adults, and as long as they're knowingly drinking it. Obviously, if someone is mislabeling stuff, that's a separate issue. But if they're knowingly going out of their way, I think it's their right in that. But then they can't, on the other hand, then be blaming anybody but themselves when they contract an infectious disease from the unpasteurized product consumption.
Very good. All right, I want to thank you, Dr. Amesh Adalja, for your time and expertise. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.